Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Blair Douglas joining us here again, our certified yoga therapist and owner of her own company, Malachite Yoga. That's the name of it. Also, her website, and it's MALACHITEYOGA.com. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jill?
I'm doing all right. Thank you. Please introduce yourself to everyone today. And how is the weather? You're in Denver, right?
I am in Denver today. Weather is good. Like Jill said, my name is Blair Douglas. I own Malachite Yoga and I'm a certified yoga therapist. So that just basically means I have an education much higher than like a yoga instructor that specializes in therapy and have a licensee to be a yoga therapist as well. But yeah, so I thought today it might be kind of fun to kind of run through some simulation stuff if you're open to it, Jill.
Absolutely.
Okay. I know we've kind of talked about this before too, of just like what a yoga therapist does, but just as like a recap for people, think of it as a whole new experience. So let's throw any yoga class you've ever taken out the window, and not to say those are not valid and that I'm not using some of those skill sets, but what it is us seeing each individual client as a whole person. So when you see me, my specialty typically is chronic pain, neurological disorders, or functional mobility issues. So my clients have a specific goal we're working towards, and I'm creating custom plans to help them achieve that goal. And a lot of times, what that looks like isn't what you would see in a yoga classroom. So that means I can take any lineage of yoga and just treat it almost as we're trying to regain self knowledge. So if yoga equals self knowledge, that's kind of what we're working towards. That all being said, I thought it'd be fun today. So, one of my specialties, as you well know, is pain, chronic pain specifically. And one of the foundation points for Pain Care Aware, which is the group out of Canada run by Neil and Lisa Pearson, is we have these foundations that we work off of. And so this is something I work with my clients. And during one of my advanced trainings with Neil and Christina Knight, they had taught us this. It's almost like a meditation, but it's not. So what we're going to do is kind of do a simulation to almost represent a triggering point. So it won't be anything painful, let's say. But what it is it's just a reminder that our brain and nervous system and other systems are working together to create and simulate sensations in the body that we sometimes forget are happening and that we have a little more control over than normal. Yeah, so I think today would be fun and this is anybody that's taking this or watching this, my suggestion, if you want to do the simulation with us, is just to find a comfortable, safe space to sit in where you either feel comfortable closing your eyes or just softening your gaze. You could also just listen to this. You could lie down. All these are optional.
Okay.
Yeah. So take a moment wherever you are, just to take a few deep breaths, find some space where you can get comfortable, where it's okay if you need to move or fidget. Don't worry about that. This will be really short. So as we get ready, go ahead and start to soften or close your eyes if you don't have them already. And I'd like you just to start to notice your breath. And when I say notice, that means I don't want you to necessarily change your breath or your cadence. I just want you to start to notice the rhythm. Might even start to just notice the length of which it comes in and comes out. If in this moment, this breath feels comfortable, just remaining at your natural cadence, please do so. If you're still feeling slightly anxious and you're having a hard time focusing in on the breath, I'd like you to focus on making the breath a little bit longer, maybe a little smoother, maybe even just a little softer. It's okay if your mind wanders from this space. Just go ahead and return back to this space and the breath. So as we settle in, just noticing the breath, I'd like you to start to visualize as if you were standing in an orchard. And I'd like you to visualize it being a citrus orchard filled with lemons. You can start to imagine the fragrance of the lemons. You might even have in the field with you a small table and a cutting board. Over the next few breaths, I'd like you to visualize yourself walking up to one of the trees and picking a lemon off. Starting to imagine what it would smell like if you just scratch the rind a little bit. Now I'd like you to take the lemon back to that table where the cutting board is and the knife. I'd like you to place the lemon on the cutting board and just cut it in half. Now for the next moment, I'd like you just to remember and smell. What does that lemon smell like? Now I'd like you to cut a wedge off the lemon. And then I'd like you to go ahead and take a large bite of the wedge of the lemon. Remembering the sensation that comes in anytime we bite into a lemon. Acknowledging the smells and scents. I'd like you just to go ahead and to start to return back to your breath. Returning back to this space. There's never any rush to leave any space with your eyes closed. If it feels best to keep them closed for a little longer, please do so. But of course, in your own time, you can start to flutter open the eyes. You might wiggle the fingers or take any other little movements that feel good just to help reawaken you into this space. So, Jill, when you're ready, there's no rush. Tell me how that experience went for you.
Actually, was able to smell and taste the lemon. The mouth went.
Yeah.
I'm really tired now. I didn't want to open my eyes.
That can happen on
I'll
occasion
relax.
too.
Yeah.
That's great.
Wow.
But what I heard from you first is I smelled and I tasted the lemon like immediately, right?
Absolutely. Just thinking about it, you can taste it. Yes.
Yes. So that's kind of what it's like, a fun simulation in the sense of just even thinking about something can create the simulation in our body because we've already had that experience, right? So immediately, most people, unless you've never bitten into a lemon, which maybe somebody hasn't out there, most people will know pretty quickly. They're like, whoa, that's a sharp pucker feeling. Even though we haven't bit an actual lemon, our brain remembers that that experience. So we relive it. So that's kind of how sometimes we talk about pain, in the way of it's a remembered thing that the body's been through, right? But just by us changing our thought pattern right now, so we were sitting here, neither one of us were having like a puckering sensation prior to that experience. But just by changing our thought pattern or thinking about something, it simulated something else in the body. And so that's something I like people to consider and think about on a more conceptual level now. So in the sensation of pain, if I can change and impact how I'm feeling or sensations I'm experiencing just by thinking about something, could I impact and change my own pain by changing my thought pattern?
I love that.
So it's
love that.
Yeah. It's stuff like that where we're trying to remind ourselves that we have actually a lot more control over our nervous system than we realized. So, 15 plus years ago, we didn't know as much as we know now. And we still, I think there's still a lot to be learned, but we're starting to learn you can change your nervous system and the way the brain and things are interacting together, right? And that opens a whole new door to people that they didn't realize existed. And I'm not saying that it's one that is easily opened, because this stuff takes a lot of work. Like, this was a fun simulation, right? We did quickly, but with my clients, I'm with them a lot for a reason, because we're trying to reinvigorate and re-enhance those experiences to then carry them over to real life. And when I say real life, I don't mean like your life isn't real all the time, even when you're meeting with me. I just mean in the sense of when you're in the kitchen cutting up vegetables or on a walk with your dog or, things along this line where it's your day-to-day life that's in turn being impacted, let's say, by chronic pain specifically. And it gives people an opportunity to feel a little less, from what I've seen in my experience with my clients, is there's all of a sudden this like aha moment and this also relief moment of realizing there is something else I can do and I'm not alone. And it's not the end all be all. So, a lot of times people go through experiences where they think they've seen everybody. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen everybody. No one can help me. I can't, there's nothing that can be done. I'm just going to have to live in this existence of what I'm experiencing currently. And so giving them an opportunity to have an open door of like, you might not go back to prior to having no chronic pain. You might never just have a full simulated life or like have an actual life where you have no pain. But what if we could impact and change it and then have more control over how it's being sent to us and how much is coming out and when and where and how we can then have some more space to work with that. Does that kind of make sense as I'm talking about it, Jill?
Yeah, and you got me thinking, trying to redirect my wrist pain is really acting up. I told you about that tendonitis, that arthritis, and it's getting worse. And there's only I could do one more cortisone shot in a few more weeks, and it's been three. And the therapy now it's not helping anymore, and I'm really in so much pain, especially today. Try the Voltaire, I'm trying to rub it, and now you got me thinking with this whole lemon thing. You're right. I could redirect this pain if I can think about it in a different way, and yeah, because if my brain can make me taste a lemon, why can't my brain change and me? I don't feel pain, but I do, but I don't. Like how? Yeah, this is what you're
Yeah.
talking about, right? So people with any type of ailment, like
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, kind of what can happen too. So, right, if you're starting to feel pain, like Jill, let's say right now you're just sitting there and you're feeling some discomfort through your wrist. So, one of the checklists that I have people kind of go through, and this is something where I'm giving you some like cliff notes, but it's definitely not
yeah,
nearly as deep as I would go with my own client to have more of a description of what I would have them do. But it would kind of be this check in of like, am I safe? Do I feel safe right now?
mm-hmm,
So, like, and that means some people don't like the word safety. So sometimes I use the word stable. Or do I feel grounded? So, am I in an environment currently where I feel at ease and in control? Okay. So, that would be the first check in. And then, do I feel like mentally safe currently? So, that's the first round of check in. If I keep moving forward right now, so let's say you were taking a yoga class or on a walk or something else, if I keep moving currently, do I think I'm going to pay for this later? So, let's say with the stuff you have going on, you're out gardening and you're cutting a bunch of stuff, that would be a check in point. Like, if I keep doing this, do I think it's going to have a flare up system or a trigger system where I feel kind of okay right now, but like I think in 3 hours when I'm done doing before I'm even done doing this or after I finish doing this, it's going to be way worse. So checking in, like, okay, how is this actually going to interact with me based on previous experiences, and could I change that? So like we go through these questions, those are the first ones. The next ones I usually ask people are, how is your breath? And when I'm saying how is your breath, it means right now, are you holding your breath? Is your breath shallow? Like, can you notice that it's only making it to like here? And of course your breath is moving interactively. Like, it's not like you're stopping breathing, but sometimes we notice the breath is sped up or it's just holding because I'm just trying to process stuff and my body has slowed down my breath or started to restrict it somewhat.
mm-hmm,
Okay. So that would be another check in point. Where is my body tension? Like, how is my body tension? So let's say you're out gardening, you're cutting stuff, and you're noticing one shoulder is like up in your ear and you're holding super tight up against something, or you're leaning in a really awkward way where actually a ton of extra muscle is being utilized throughout your body that you don't really need to do if we just made some modifications in the sense of how we're standing or how we're moving, where I could relax some of the body tension that's actually not necessary in this moment. Lastly, what I'd have them check in with is, where are my thoughts? And that's kind of the start of that simulation today. What am I actually thinking about right now? So let's say you're out in the garden, and I know this is just an obscure example, but you're out in the garden and you're thinking about this argument you just had with somebody about whatever. And so you notice, like, I'm already agitated. I'm already in an agitated state. I'm out working on stuff. I can tell things are not sitting right. And I'm kind of just trying to override my system because I'm a little flustered. So what I typically have people do, I'm like, okay, so we've done this check-in. Now we have this information. Great. What do we do with that? So that's where we go in a little more depth, and I have them step back and be like, okay, how did we process that? And what if we changed those things? So let's say our breath was totally fine. Okay, so we don't really need to change the breath, but the body tension was up and my thoughts are askew. They're kind of stressed out, like I am stressed out from this argument. What happens if I step back and change those two things and then reapproach the activity I was doing? How do I feel? It seems simple. Like, for a lot of people, I'll describe it to them. They're like, okay, great. That's not a problem at all. But remembering that when you're already at a heightened state of pain or uncomfortable is really hard unless you've done it a ton of times. So like those are things we practice over time together. And we have to learn and customize based on that person's activities and what they're doing. So even for you, like say, if you're just sitting in your chair right now and you're experiencing a ton of pain, that might be a moment where you're like, okay, how are my thoughts? How is my body tension? And how is my breath? And can I change any of these things and start to notice there's a difference in the amount of pain I'm experiencing, let's say in my wrist? It's these little check-ins and reminders that those can impact how our nervous system is sending signals, right? There's more to it than, especially because, right, if you're just sitting there, let's say you're not doing anything, the likelihood of you having any tissue damage occurring right now, in my opinion, is basically zero. If you're not moving your hand, it's not in a position where you would be doing harm to it. And I'm not saying movement is going to cause harm. I'm just saying if you're sitting still, like I have clients that are laying down in bed, nothing is happening. They're in a secure position. Their body is in good alignment and they're still in tons of pain. That tells us something is going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we're starting to learn.
I wish I had a pillow here. That's what I'm thinking. I should have something my arm is not comfortable here. I need to get something to make it more comfortable. Go ahead. Still listening.
Oh yeah, no. And so that's like the thing is too, where you start to learn, like, how could I even give myself a little more ease by taking away some of the pressure? So if there was pressure going on, like I would never tell any of my clients unless a doctor had specifically said you can no longer move in this direction, and they felt also that that was a valid information they'd been given. And I'm not saying that a doctor telling you not to move is not valid. What I'm saying is sometimes there's moments where we dramatize, like in the medical system, things can be dramatized, and people have been told something very quickly once. And this is something I spoke about, right? Like, who's the expert in the room when we met on our second week, where they dramatize something. And, it's not just the medical industry, other industries do this as well. We dramatize something, somebody is stuck on that information, and then they stop moving. So where I come in too is like, let's figure out what our range of motion is, what the movement is, what do you want to do? That's the other thing, is like, it's great if I can move my wrist like this, like that's great and helpful. But if I can't do this one activity I specifically gives me a lot of joy in my life, and that's what I'm trying to work towards, that's the goal. It's not just I want to move my wrist like this, it's that I want to do this other activity that I've been missing out on because of what, like the problems that have come up based on either chronic pain or like a functional mobility thing. And sometimes neurological stuff too. Like we see people that get diagnosed with different types of neurological disorders, right? Parkinson's, other things. You lose some of the mobility and control of body parts, right? So like you'll see somebody have a tremor or they can't hold something. So what I'm working on too is like, let's reintegrate and start to gain back some more confidence and control of that system. It could be something very minor. Like we all of a sudden can move this wrist again 5 extra%. And that could be done based on, I actually give them a physical activity we're doing. It could also be done by, like I taught them a meditation. They visualize the movement from a first person perspective. And all of a sudden they're like, I don't know why, but now I can move this a little better. You'll see a lot of athletes do this, right? They visualize their goal when they're performing, and they'll tell you, like, it helps me achieve this better balance, or like I felt like I could push through this experience because I visualized myself doing it, or that movement. And I've done this time and time again. I take a class and I'm like, the instructor will teach something, right? And I'm like, I legitimately have no idea how I'm supposed to get in that pose. I'm like, I can't comprehend it. Like I can comprehend it. Like I've taken hundreds and hundreds of yoga classes, but I'm like, today my muscular system, everything doesn't want to do that. And sometimes I just leave it. I'm like, that's totally fine. There's other days where I've just stopped, took a moment to visualize myself doing it, and then all of a sudden could do it. And I was like, how interesting. And how it's just something that good reminder that, like, I actually have more control of my system than maybe I've been led to believe for a lot of years. And that's not based on because somebody else is trying to trick you or control you. They just didn't have the information, right? That science is newer science in the sense of it wasn't done the early 1900s. We just have newer science, and mattering on who you're talking to, if they've kept up with that science, can differ on the interaction you have with them. So I always would highly recommend, Jill, like, let's say you were my client, I'd be like, okay, so I want you to just figure out what goals you have for yourself. Like, what are you missing out on based on this happening? And it could be stuff where it's more social based, even, right?
It
Like,
was so funny. Later, I was supposed to drive somewhere, and I said, I can't drive. It hurts too much to drive. And it's using my cell phone every day for work, for texting, for calling,
yeah,
drying my hair, putting on makeup. The computer board here, ow, ow, ow. So I'm starting to try to use more of the left hand, but most messed up's on the right. I have to reassemble.
exactly. So it's one of those things, like, you and I would have a conversation. I'd be like, okay, so what are we missing out on now? Like, what goals do we want to set for ourselves? And it's sometimes one of those things where, yeah, maybe after a few sessions, it's like, well, I still can't do that. That's not unusual. It's a retraining of your whole system to give you better feedback, but also to note, like, when tissue damage is happening, like, understanding that pain does not equate to tissue damage, that those are not equal things. It's an alarm system. Like Neil will tell you, it's an alarm system to get you to redirect. I don't want you doing this anymore, so I am going to send a signal to you to get you to stop doing that. Problem with that is you stop doing stuff, and then it starts impacting a lot more than just, the one little activity I was doing now is turned into like 5 activities I don't feel even comfortable doing.
Yeah.
And and that plays on people mentally. So that's where, with like yoga therapy, right? Like, when you see a PT, I think it can be really wonderful. And I'll never discount a PT, a psychotherapist, or anybody, because those people know their fields and they know them well, and they're well trained in those fields. But with yoga therapy, what it is I get the opportunity to see people as a whole person. So they show up to me, we have discussions. And like some days, and I think I've told you guys this before, it's like some days I have clients show up, and what we do is I just need a list. They just need somebody to listen. They just need an outlet for a moment, of a sounding board. And no, by no means am I a psychotherapist, like I said, but sometimes it wouldn't go as well of a session if I was just like, that's great, you're feeling that way, I'm sorry, we need
Yeah.
to move on.
Mm-hmm.
That helps no one. So that's where this check-in, and is really great with yoga therapy, is you have somebody in an opportunity to be seen as a whole person, to have each session completely customized and modified based on that day and what you're working towards. And yes, we might have a big overall goal, but maybe that day we need one goal, and it's a very small one just for that day to achieve. So we work towards that experience. So really today, what the discussion is about is you can impact your pain and a lot of other things in ways that I think sometimes people forget they have a little more control over than they realize. And you can re-simulate things in your body if you have the opportunity to like pause, stop. A lot of this too is like, you can't be on technology when you're doing this. Not in the sense of like when I do virtual sessions, that's not really what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean is like if you're scrolling through Facebook, you're like, oh, I'm just consciously thinking about how much my hand hurts right now. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't play out the same as when
No.
you actually set things down and like maybe close your eyes and just become aware of your breath and just do a check-in with yourself. Like, how am I today? How am I actually doing in this moment right now? And understanding too, like that's not based on like I'm not telling anybody to judge yourself and like do a
Mm-hmm.
checklist of like, oh, everything's jacked and like I'm just screwed today. No. What I mean is check in, see how you're doing, and then reaffirm with yourself, like, okay, I might be struggling in these areas today.
Got it. Well, I apologize. We're
But
almost out of time. We have a
oh
minute
yeah,
left.
totally. But do those check-ins, check in with how you're feeling, just notice those things and just start to become aware of you and how you're interacting with yourself can make big leaps and changes in your chronic pain.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Blair Douglas. How can we reach you?
You can reach me anytime at Malachite Yoga. That's MALA CHITE yoga.com. And yeah, self check-in. I always promote it and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much. Have a great one. Bye-bye, hon.
Hi, my name is Blair Douglas and I'm a certified human. Just kidding. I'm actually a certified yoga therapist specializing in chronic pain, neurological disorders, and functional mobility. If you're somebody living with one or all of these things and looking for support in your life, contact me anytime at malachiteyoga.com. That's MALACHITE yoga.com. I look forward to hearing your story.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.